Another day in the darkness, another Breath of the Wild 2 rumor, or as some might call it, a leak. With this heavily anticipated Zelda title, a sequel to one of the biggest and best Zelda games that relatively recently released, there's going to be a lot of talk about this game when we're in the dark like this. And when it comes to these rumors, I love to discuss, dissect, and think about how plausible and possible they are. And as a fellow Zelda fanatic, I know you guys are too. With this specific rumor, it deals a bit with the story and the overall progress of Breath of the Wild 2. As always, let's see how well this can be applied from what we know of the original Breath of the Wild. What's up guys, it's HMK once again with another Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 video based on a rumor/leak. This one is a little bit dated, but as always, I like to let them simmer a bit before I create content on it. If you like discussing these aspects, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Alright, with that being said, let's drop on in for the safety of hype and dive directly into the 5th dimension. Now once again, this leak rumor comes from Reddit, and with all leaks and rumors, you should take it with a huge grain of salt. But hey, it's fun to talk about. Anyways, the biggest takeaway from this rumor starts at the beginning. It states that unlike the first part, the first game, Breath of the Wild 2 will be linear at the beginning. Now later on in the explanation for this rumor, it does make a bit sense, but for me that's a huge red flag considering that the biggest takeaway from Breath of the Wild is that it was an open air adventure. That was the biggest aspect of its identity. Once you got off the Great Plateau, you can literally just go. And if the true name of Breath of the Wild 2 has any aspect of wild retained into it, then I don't think that this might be the biggest brain play. But once again, it does say in the beginning, so it could be a type of Great Plateau aspect within Breath of the Wild 2, and this is a leak/rumor. It goes on to state that within the story, canonically, Link already knows Hyrule, so there isn't a point in climbing the towers again. Now, this does make sense, as Eiji Aonuma and the team already confirmed that Breath of the Wild 2 will take place in the same world of Hyrule as it did in the first Breath of the Wild, but a lot of us expect and speculate that the world will be adapted, changed subtly here and there in order to make it still feel kind of fresh but familiar, as well as the proposed idea that they're gonna add an extra layer to the world of Hyrule by allowing us to explore the underground. But when it comes to these changes of the overworld, if some time were to pass in Hyrule, then we would expect the world to be rebuilt, to heal, and be more fleshed out, as Nintendo was looking for more help when it comes to the topography of Breath of the Wild 2's world. Now, the reason on why the game will be linear at the beginning is elaborated on in this part, saying that the developers have filled the world with miasmic versions of Ganon, and as we know, the reference of miasma could be in line for what we know in the Zelda series to be Malice. That apparently infections of Malice will be all over certain parts of Hyrule, and until the infection is cleared from location to location, it will be impossible to move around the entirety of Hyrule. Now, this part makes a ton of sense, as we've seen hints about this over in the original Breath of the Wild, with such areas like the Colosseum, the Akala Citadel, and of course, Hyrule Castle. But from what this leak or rumor suggests, that certain parts of Hyrule will be so infected that you won't be able to advance to certain areas makes me think that there's going to be a lot more Malice to deal with. But here's the double-edged sword to that. By the end of the original Breath of the Wild, when Link and Zelda defeat the Calamity Ganon, as we see here in the Hyrule Castle, it seems it's pretty much cleared of all the Malice that used to be all over the massive building and the ruins of the castle town. Which makes me go on to believe that the rest of the Malice all over the world of Hyrule after Calamity Ganon's defeat and seal has been washed away or faded or just gone, poof. I definitely got that feeling after looking at Hyrule at the end of the true ending of Breath of the Wild. So if this leak suggests that Malice is still going to be in the world of Hyrule and we're gonna have to clear it up as part of the, aftermath situation, then that seems kind of hazy. However, on the other edge of the sword, the Malice could be an immediate byproduct from what is the supposed beginning of Breath of the Wild 2 from what we see in the trailer, in which the Malice goes crazy and super red, like way more red than we saw in the original Breath of the Wild when Calamity Ganondorf wakes up. And we've seen how angry the mouse gets after his awakening. I mean, it shoots up to the ceiling and everything. So it could be possible that when he wakes up, the mouse just explodes, and when Hyrule Castle rises from the ground, it kind of becomes like a malice volcano and shoots and spreads in certain parts of Hyrule, and that's how the mouse gets to those points, and then that's when we're gonna have to clean up those infections. So that aspect could be very plausible, especially considering if we're gonna use that special green hand power in order to clean up the malice. You guys want Super Mario Sunshine 2? Nah, Breath of the Wild 2. The leak moves on to name drop McVicker, which I want to assume is referencing Tyler McVicker, who is the creator of the Valve News Network and is known for diving deep into investigating video games. The leak states that McVicker hints at the appearance of dungeons, which is something that we all want and we all expect and speculate, that are strongly inspired by one game that knows a lot about spreading dungeons around an open world. Now this to me is a coin flip in the air because there are a bunch of games that do that. However, it does make a lot of sense that Breath of the Wild 2 would need some help in that department because that was one complaint from the original Breath of the Wild. Even though I did like the Divine Beasts, traditional dungeons were something we all missed and heavily desired in the sequel. So for Nintendo to be inspired by another game that will be able to pull it off really well, sounds like something that is extremely viable in order to incorporate it into a sequel for Breath of the Wild. Especially since that everybody and their mamas when it comes to the Zelda fans really want dungeons and that the world of Hyrule is already established. What could be possible is that with the spread of malice that is referenced earlier in this leak, each area that gets covered in malice somehow grows a dungeon out of malice, which sounds really nasty. And possibly defeating and clearing this dungeon will clear the malice in each area. But then that would mean that the dungeon itself would disappear, and I know a lot of people like to go back to dungeons to get everything they missed in the dungeon. So how about instead of the mouse creating a dungeon, each malice summons a dungeon that was dormant within the land and just made it rise out of the ground, and then it'll stay there after the mouse is gone, and then you'll be able to explore it to your heart's content. Or like all of us were saying, you go down into the underground to a dungeon that's tied to an area that has the mouse around it, and that's why the mouse got drawn to that specific dungeon. I'm just spitballing here, and you clear the dungeon underground and that will clear the mouse above ground. Yeah, I like that better. Wrapping up, this rumor states that in general, while designing the world of Breath of the Wild 2, developers were inspired by Red Dead Redemption 2, which is officially known, and the rumor states that. However, it is also inspired by another unknown game. Let's play the naming game of that unknown game. If this is true, I'm sure that the Zelda team is going to name drop it at one point during interviews and whatnot. And that's the whole rumor. Now, like I said before, I feel the portion that the world being filled up with miasmic versions of Ganon, aka Malice, is pretty plausible given to what we've seen in the original Breath of the Wild, and that Nintendo and the Zelda team would like to play more with that idea in the sequel. You know, flesh out more the concept of malice and how to possibly deal with it. But for me, the big red flag on this concept is that the game will be linear in the beginning because of this. And the reason why is that, of course, Breath of the Wild, the original, was such an open air game. It was the open air game. That was part of its identity, that was part of the draw, and that's why so many people played and enjoyed it. You would think that they would expand and open up on that concept for the sequel instead of taking aspects of that away. Like, sure, making the game a bit more linear for the story, or the story itself a little bit more linear, would be all welcomed. But to make the gameplay more linear in a sequel, I don't buy that. Especially since traversing the world of Hyrule in the original Breath of the Wild was marketed and rewarded to players who decide to think outside the box when tackling certain areas and traversing around it. You can literally get to almost any area within Breath of the Wild in a number of ways. So to limit the notion of you won't be able to get to a certain part of Hyrule thanks to the miasma really limits on the creativity and the sheer know-how on how to get to a certain area. Like, how bad is it gonna be considering how many ways you can get to a certain area in the original that I can't even go to that area in the sequel thanks to the malice? You really gonna tell me that's gonna cut off all possible known ways of going into a specific area and limiting that creativity? I don't buy that. Once again, the saving grace to that concept is that it will be only in the beginning of the game. But that also scratches my head because that concept in itself doesn't sound small. So to be existent only in the beginning of the game doesn't really add up to me either. Hey, I'm all for the concept of clearing up malice from Hyrule, but don't limit the game's openness to linearity because of that. So for me, this leak/rumor, it has some plausible aspects to it, but it's 50-50, a double-edged sword. But I want to know what you guys think about this specific rumor/leak in the comment section below, and be sure to share up the video to bring others into the 5th dimension and get the conversation going. Don't forget to like and subscribe as I post Zelda content every week. And once again, big thanks to my Patreon supporters for helping making this video happen. The details to my Patreon and how you can support for just $1 a month is going to be in the description box below. Alright guys, until the next video, this has been HMK from the 5th dimension, and I'll check you guys later.